I wrote this thing up. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is my education in music. And it was a common thing that almost every time that I wrote a song, it wasn't until I played the song about 10 times that I didn't want to play that song, no matter how much people liked it, ever again. And I wondered this morning after I stayed up late and wrote this if I wasn't really gonna want to say the things that I wrote down, but this is what it is. So the premise of this is ultimately like, man is born into bondage. He will remain in bondage until he dies to some degree physically, and the freedom he can find in Christ is by using his time wisely and having mental and spiritual freedom. But I cannot really discern that the physical aspects of bondage will end. Even if a man may be liberated in his mind and spirit, that the things that pertain to this life, where there is some kind of mastery over him, like if he would have a will that was contrary to the things that he would desire, he'd still have to fight against these things physically. And so like the great task that I perceive is finding what is a purposeful use of your time or talents. So I'll just start out with this section about bondage. In college, I had a professor in world religions, though I looked this word decrepitude up in the dictionary, and it just kind of describes it as being old and feeble, and like the general word infirmity or sickness seems to fulfill it best. And like when you're young, you have health and you have strength, but you have no wisdom. And if you don't have a teacher to show you how to do something appropriately, you probably won't end up doing it well, unless you're just naturally gifted. And when you're old, you have much wisdom and you've learned all kinds of things, but your body is often weak and you need somebody else's help. I mean, Jesus said to John, when you're old, somebody's gonna, or was it Peter? Talking about one of his disciples, basically, that when he was old, even though when he was young, he could gird himself when he was young, but when he's old, somebody else is going to have to do it. We go to the nursing home and see these people, and they cannot help themselves. And so, like, when I think about this kind of concept of decrepitude, like, the college professor said that this is how, as I understand it, what he was saying, Siddhartha Gautama, who is the Buddha, described life, having everything and nothing. That's how he described, like, the definition of the word decrepitude. So imagine that you would have wealth without the wisdom to govern it. What good could your money do you? Or suppose inversely that you were in poverty, or to have strength but no skill, or to have desire but no heart to gain it. Is anyone familiar with that proverb that says, "Wherefore is there a price in the hand of a fool to get wisdom, seeing he hath no heart to it?" Like a man may behold the things of God and his deep mysteries, his secrets, things that he wants to apply to his life, but if his heart is lazy, he will not attain these things. He will not easily get them, even if he could potentially buy these things with money. Like Simon the sorcerer was like, "Give me too this gift, that I may attain it." But like God will only give these things to a man that is humble. And what if you have humility, but no teacher, or a teacher, but no patience? And these thoughts about human bondage are leading me to this next thing, which is just titled arrest. And from my youth, it appears that God has arrested me repeatedly from being able to fulfill the things that I would have otherwise found myself doing and succeeding in life. Like, like what in the world, your parents raise you and they're like, well, what do you want? Go pursue it. And so my heart was filled with the desire for like all that I saw, just like Ecclesiastes talks about. And it says, like, like take in whatever you want, like be free in your heart, young man, for the days of darkness shall be many. But know that God, keep him in your remembrance all the days of your life, for he will bring all these things unto judgment. And it feels like he let me do a lot of things that I would have otherwise liked to do. And yet there are many other things that I think I would have desired to do and be successful in that I think he just otherwise just stopped or put a block. Like Job talks about, like he has hedged me in and I cannot fight against it. I liked writing music a lot. And I remember how rewarding it was to write songs, but it was not very rewarding to play songs or to perform them. And so I'd go out into public and I'd play for people, and then ultimately, like, it was more common than not that whether I got a favorable response from people or an unfavorable or both, I still went home depressed and just not too thrilled about like what I felt. I remember one night somebody gave me a gig at this club, and there was this woman in the front row, and she just stared me down like the whole time. And there were other people that were musicians there that complimented me and told me that what I played was skillful. But I remember how bad this person that I would even imagine had not a lot of acquaintance with how to play an instrument just showed scorn for what I played. And so these things were really formative for me. These experiences, like why would it be that this lifestyle that was portrayed to be so rewarding, like these guys that they make money traveling, gigging, selling their merchandise. It all looks very appealing, but ultimately I imagine that it's a pride-swallowing siege, really, before they get to this place of success. And I didn't have I did not have a motivation to pursue these things either. Like, it is clear to me that God did not give me an aspiration greater than just kind of loafing about or watching movies. And I went to college, I did my courses, but I'm pretty sure that my high school was more rigorous than my college. And so it really wasn't a challenging period of life. And the employment of my time during that time was in, like, basically school, part-time jobs, music venues, and church activities. And in an overwhelming search for a sense of meaning in it all, because I generally felt very discontented, and like I had practically everything that I could have imagined wanting in life, or that I would have been supposed to have, like been raised to tell was important to have, maybe even a lot of privilege, but I could not find satisfaction in it, or even feel like that it wasn't just very empty, a lot of the things that I spent my time doing. I remember having a conversation with a man in church about it, and he kind of just admonished me that I needed to just be happier. And I think as time went on, I don't think that my feelings were wrong when I spent all my time listening to music or playing video games, or like I had no goal, but like this man that told me I just needed to be happier, I perceived that he was involved in the same level of shallow living that I was. And so that maybe he wasn't the guy to give me direction. I completed college. I was employed after that as a social worker. A lot of college seemed like also this very obscure thing. Like, what was I doing here? Why was I learning these things? Like, how was this building me up to be a man? I perceived largely that most of what I spent my time on was very vain. Like, just, this is what came out of my heart. Like, I don't think most people thought of their lives that way, but that's how I thought of my life. It's just a very vain life. And I used to go around talking to people and telling them, like, vanity is vitality. Vanity is vitality. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you didn't have to rise out of this morning. Your survival is not absolutely needful. And you're going to these classes that you don't have to attend. You dye your hair. Like, their participation in most of these worldly systems is just a construct that everybody agreed to participate in, and that's why they function in it. But it isn't absolutely like a matter of need that they're there learning these things or participating in these things, and the job they want may not even be something like in a deep, like in a way either good for them to pursue, even if it would afford them a lot of wealth and success as a person in this life. And but I definitely felt this sort of arrest in college as well. I had a lot of free time, and I was chronically plagued with this idea that, like, I was investing my life in the lives of these people that I was currently with, and then in a couple of years we weren't going to see each other anymore. Like, they and me, it was all going to go away, and this really bothered me. Later, after college, I got a job people used to congratulate me for doing. They thought it was very important in healing to the world as a social worker. I wasn't really persuaded it was the case. And I eventually came to this place where I kind of felt like, as a single man, to be unmarried and be encumbered by such a job, and to spend all my time pursuing the gaining of money without a greater vision in life, like to just be tied down to this sort of yoke, was not ultimately purposeful. And so eventually I put my resignation in that job, and I pursued traveling. So I took off traveling, wondering what it was that I was going to see. And one of the most remarkable things that I remember finding is, like, everywhere that I went, there always seemed to be a person that I feel like God was witnessing to me about, like, just how much I was like that person, or could end up like that person, whether good or bad. And I have these notes in parentheses, the gaining of instruction, like in the Proverbs, it talks about, get instruction, for it is your life. And much like the man who was walking by the grove of the man whose wall was all broken down and overgrown by thorns, that by observing him he gained instruction. And in the long and enduring sense, I became yet again arrested, considering, well, what was I doing? And if I was going to travel still, if I was going to continue to do this, why was I going to continue doing this? And I had all of these things in the New Testament that would have otherwise instructed me about being a part of some sort of assembly. And so, like, day in, day out, I wrote the pros and cons of doing that, and what I gained and what I lost. And eventually I chose not to continue to go that way. And when I ended up being with brothers, uh, now I began to work with them, but it wasn't like a desk job. I mean, it was like now I was learning trades and doing these things with them. Also gaining instruction from their life, observing them, but still wondering um, the significance of it. So much, like, I still had so many thoughts about wanting to read the Bible or search myself internally about spiritual things, subjects, ideas. And it was really hard for me to give up the idea of returning to traveling. And I thought so much about this idea that in the long and enduring sense, past a sort of stage of exploration for these things, like when you meet a person, people only seem to be able to relate to or willing to deal with you if you are either a master or you have a master. Like, if you have some trade by which you support yourself, or you are employed, reflecting responsibility and order. Uh, Thomas à Kempis, I remember him talking about, like, go where you want. But I think that you will ultimately find, he says, that it is far better to subject yourself to authority somewhere in some form or fashion, because I'm not exactly sure of the picture of everything that he was trying to reflect, but I can at least take something from his words and out of this, and that it was far harder for a man to be in authority than to be an authority. I spent the last 3 years or so working with Lloyd uh, during the spring and summer seasons, and the consistency of just having that one job has really, like, changed my mind in such a way that I feel like I have gained a lot of instruction just practically in observing the fulfilling of these simple tasks. And when I keep saying that phrase, to gain instruction, so much about the father in the book of Proverbs talking to his son is so that his son may prosper and survive. And I don't imagine that the only thing that the father would have said to the son were matters of moral importance, like avoiding evil women and evil men. I don't imagine that that would have been the sum of all that he had to say to his son. But like, but also Proverbs, like, like, if you don't work diligently, like, poverty shall clothe you in rags, and your want will come upon you like an armed warrior. Like, in this picture, this proverb, like, the thing that impresses upon me is that this man that is like an armed warrior is a sort of authority. Like, even God has set in order in your very body that if you don't work, your muscles will atrophy. And if you don't eat, your hunger will only increase. It will not decrease. You cannot avoid, like, the way that he has hedged you in or set in order all your faculties. I mean, like, if a man was not burdened by these things, what would he do practically, and why would he pursue it? Like, though he could do just about anything he set his hands to, if he did not have these obligations or necessities upon him, what is it that would change his character? You know what I mean? Like, would he have need of money if he did not have need of eating? Or, like, and if he didn't have need of money, then he wouldn't have to wear his clothes out so fast doing all these manual labor jobs that just tear them to shreds. And so, this is just another way that I view the way that God has set in order a sort of bondage for man to bear. Now, in that, I mean, his spirit can be uplifted. He can be optimistic about his circumstances and happy in all of his labor. I studied philosophy in college further, and the character of Socrates is really outstanding to me in such a way that he seemed like this guy that was really intelligent and had a lot of liberty, and he just went around pursuing ideas and having conversations with people. But I think so much about the way that this is described to me uh, by my professors is lacking, in the sense that Socrates would have been an old, well-seasoned man, a veteran of warfare, as I understand it, and I can only imagine had his hands in a multitude of trades in such a way that, like, I do believe that college institutions produce people that have aspirations to be like that, but like their lack of practical knowledge, or bowing under what is a despised sort of bondage, like this yoke where you would learn a trade or gain a skill with your hands. They have only head knowledge, and so like the result of it is a lot of their relating and their perspective to the world is very lacking. Like, I see this in myself. Um, and so I think a lot sometimes about the men that I observe, either in this assembly or who have left this assembly, that I have aspired to be like, and this is concerning fulfilling my potential. Like, what is it that I'm supposed to do with my time? And the difference between me and them, and why they have both their actions and reward with them, like why it is that they're motivated to do the things that they do. Uh, Somebody casually, told me the sum of money one brother made one year for all of his labor in the work season. And I think I had admiration for what he did and how diligent he was, but I couldn't help but wonder, like once he had the money, what was he going to do with it? Or like, what vision did he have for it? I don't honestly feel like in this way that God has removed this from me in such a way that I have like imagination for what I could further put this to if I worked that hard. What I would naturally be doing right now, if I were capable of doing something in a carnal sense, is probably still pursue music. I I like playing music. I like singing. And if you can just get over the anxieties of performance and not worry about what people think, eventually you'll succeed. And like, I feel like actually I that after all this time, my musical knowledge has increased. My understanding of how touring and setting up gigs and all the practicalities, that if a man was diligent, he really could be successful at doing this. But I have come to, like, it's only because God has disciplined me that I have even come to this place that I could even have these thoughts. Like, when I was a young man, I did not have the capability or understanding to pursue this thing, but I grasped that I have it now and could. But I perceive that it is only because God has strengthened me through disciplining me that I would be even able to pursue this, because I had neither the will nor motivation. And some of these things, like, that would keep me from doing that are the gaining of instruction from the lives of musicians. I perceive that ultimately at the end of their life, there's nothing for them. Like, it is often a youth-driven culture. They end up living in obscurity, in emotional burnout, addiction, criminal lifestyles, bad company, and specifically a culture of pleasure and often drugs. And my mind always revisits these places where when I'm young, like, what if I started my own music venue? And what if I only, like, played this sort of music and I didn't sing about anything evil? And I try to picture a venue where it was redeemed or somehow profitable. And people say, though I'm not exactly sure of all the origins of this, that rock and roll has its origins in the occult or witchcraft or satanic things. I don't know if everyone starts out from that end or who began this movement in that way, if it is, but, like, even without all that, people's bad habits, people are so inclined to bad habits that the whole scene being based around pleasure and enjoyment is ultimately irredeemable in this respect as well. Like, you cannot remove all of the things, the pleasure-seeking habits that would bring a degenerate lifestyle and culture to that whole scene. Like, you cannot remove it. And so I think about how much I don't want my character to be negatively affected by the company that I keep. And even if I could shine as favorably as I could upon all of these other people participating in it with me, if they did not have a moral conviction that was equal or greater than mine, then ultimately I'm going to end up bending their way. If, like, I will not be the thing that defines that. Like, it's very hard for me to not revisit these things in the past. Like, I don't know why, and some of it's probably because, like, adulthood seems so obscure to me. Like so many of the things, I mean, like, I just did the things that I wanted to do, and that was quite natural when I was young. But now, as an adult, like, I conform to the ways and lifestyles that seem rational to me, the things that are required of me. But not all of these things are very natural for me. They're not the things that, like, if left to my own devices, I would find myself doing. And so, the other thing I was thinking about music is that, like, one time Teo quoted this thing from the New Testament to me on a different subject, but this line that I might not even remember had he not said it, but worldly sorrow worketh death. Like, godly sorrow worketh repentance unto eternal life, but God, like, worldly sorrow worketh death. And, like, these songs, just having listened to them so many times and thinking about them, Buddy talked about how they held his greatest of affections, and he can't even stand to think about them because of the fact that they, like, steal his focus from God. Like, he cannot discuss these things, I think, without feeling tainted from being affected by them. And so, like, I honestly feel like these songs are not the Spirit of God fueling them, and they're bewitching. Like, they fuel an overall obsession and also confusion, and they are emotionally binding in ways that, like filling me with deep despair and sadness, no matter how much they are in fact beautiful or skillfully written. Something that is, like, poisonous, though it has all the appearance of, like, something that would be good for you. This further transitions with a conversation I had with Max. I mean, I relayed some of these ideas to him the other night at the communal meal. And his response to me was that he thought that fatherhood and marital obligations like are going to answer a lot of these basic questions for me very soon, and that there won't be a lot of time to ponder what's next or what I should be doing with my time. And where I find myself currently concerning all these things is sometimes, like, I it is hard for me to not envy or covet the lives of people whose lives are very well ordered. And but I guess if I'm to be really honest, I don't regret all of the ways that I have spent my time or found that what I've learned in them or gained is unprofitable entirely. I guess I had more notes and thoughts from different things that I've written down in the past, but I don't think that I'm going to read them. A lot of this, though, has to do with the frustrations that I feel and not having a sense that my time is being used profitably, and basically overcoming a lot of the habits that have defined the way that I've lived for a long time. Like when I wrote all these things down, I went to a diner at 10 o'clock at night because I could not sit at home. And this is a habit that I gained from college whenever I would write a paper all night or something like this, and not really rising early to pray. I have thought about how much I feel like in desiring a well-ordered life externally, it is very easy to neglect all of the things that are like an alive internal life that God wants you to have. Rising early to consider your ways and praying to God for strength and praying for the brethren. And I definitely feel like I have sins that need to be forsaken in this respect, to not live according to my inspiration or passion, but just like grasp the thing that is in front of me that I perceive is right to do, and then do it, knowing that God will reward me for this. And I think I had a lot of thoughts that circled around all of these notes, but at the time I cannot completely remember all that would have been there to talk about. So I'll just read this from the Old Testament, Psalm 39, which has this, to me, this picture of the eternal, where a man is considering his ways and under a deep and grave burden. One thought that I failed to add was just like, there have been times that I could not find the will to read the Bible. And like in Lebanon, when we lived there, I just started observing the lives of other men. Like I comprehended that I read the Bible, I read the epistles, the New Testament, but now it was being lived out in such a way that I'm like, well, show me how you do it. Like I've read these words, but what is the meaning behind them? And there were many days that I just had this deep longing in my heart to be released from this sense of arrest or lack of direction or personal agency in life. And so the psalmist says, I said I will guard my ways, that I may not sin with my tongue. I will keep a muzzle on my mouth as long as the wicked are in my presence. I was silent and still, I held my peace to no avail. My distress grew worse. My heart became hot within me. While I mused, the fire burned. Then I spoke with my tongue. Lord, let me know my end. And what is the measure of my days? Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a few handbreadths, and my lifetime is as nothing in your sight. Surely everyone stands as a mere breath. Surely everyone goes about like a shadow. Surely for nothing they are in turmoil. They heap up and do not know who will gather. And now, O Lord, what do I wait for? My hope is in you. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Do not make me the scorn of the fool. I am silent. I do not open my mouth, for it is you who have done it. Remove your stroke from me. I am worn down by the blows of your hand. You chastise mortals in punishment for sin, consuming like a moth what is dear to them. Surely everyone is a mere breath. Selah. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear to my cry. Do not hold your peace at my tears, for I am your passing guest, an alien, like all my forebears. Turn your gaze away from me, that I may smile again before I depart and am no more.
Thank you for your testimony, son-in-law. It was very interesting. There used to be a TV show, not that was something, an anomaly or something extraordinary. I say back in the 50s and 60s, maybe Joe was around, but you didn't have a TV, Joe. Yeah. The name of the show, it's a terrible name, but it was called Naked City. And the city was New York City. And they used to say there's 8 million stories like that. It was basically that was kind of a police and cop and robber type of show, but it was called Naked City. It was very popular in the 60s and late 50s. But after someone gave their testimony, they would say, there are 8 million other testimonies like this in the city, the Big Apple, New York City. So we all have things like that. Growing up in the 60s, with the rebellious hippies and college student riots and all that, I know in music, one of the big things was, I was guilty a little, but not as guilty as a lot. That doesn't by any means clear me, but the decibel level in the 60s for music was real high, and now it's gotten a little worse. You know, they just drown you out with noise. I mean, you're just driving on the highway, and someone will pull up to you if there's a red light, and they will just drown you out with that music. I don't even look over anymore, but you know, the decibel level, the noise from the 60s, 50 years ago until now, has increased. And the parents back then, they didn't know how to discipline the children, and they didn't discipline the children. Their idea was to just get along with them and compromise and just get along and let them have their way. And now we're reaping the whirlwind in many ways. The education that you mentioned, brother, the system is, the God of this world just blinded the eyes. And if anyone who sends their children to a public school, you're sending them to the wolves. They're going to be devoured very, very quickly. And I know from my college education, not Euripides, but Epicurus was a big thing they mentioned. Someone like Epicurus, the Greek philosopher. You ever hear of Epicurus? And Epicureans, but he said this two things, Epicurus. And of course, Paul in Acts 17 talks about some of these Greek philosophers. Epicurus said that God is if he is in control, he just must be unable to stop all the evil or the wickedness in the world. He had it like that. One, he had a dilemma. The other one was, well, maybe just God is wicked himself. Either God is a wicked God, or he's just not powerful enough to stop the wicked. And they don't understand the behind the scenes, which Genesis will say, of the evil one who's controlling, and how Jesus came in to stop that, but to rescue us from this thing. But when you read the Bible, or any of us read it, we see that we love because he first loved us. And just like the prodigal son, and you have a prodigal son type of testimony, Joseph, and I guess most of us do, But when we read the prodigal son, the loving father comes running to meet us as we repent. And so that's a positive thing from the music or the bondage or all the things that have held us captive. And as far as the music, it's my opinion, the hybrid would be Christian rock, would be to mix them together. The way I shared that vanity plate, USA, Jesus Saves. But the hybrid would be, well, you can have the best of both worlds. But no, you should hate it with a passion. It is not Christian at all rock. It's just poison. Rock and roll is, from what I understood back in the 60s, it was just a synonym for fornication, rock and roll. And the hybrid is something to be aware of, and we should be dead to those things. My God was sports. And I'll tell you a secret here, and I would never bind it on anyone else, because of course Yolanda and Manel would know, but some of you brothers have that thing. I mean, I would, if I had my way, and this is just me, Robert Kane, I would knock down every backboard basketball thing in the world. Oh, I would not. Any volleyball net, anything. Nothing matter with sports and exercise. I say exercise for children, but I would just, I would do it with a passion. I would have a watermelon smile as every backboard basketball thing and every ball, every hockey puck. With a passion, I would gloat with it. The way the young people are blowing up fireworks in my neighborhood last night, just for that. But anyway, that's me, and I don't insist on anything like that. But Jesus did associate with tax collectors, adulterers, as we read in the Gospel of John. You know, you get the woman at the well, the paralytic, the adulteress, the man born blind. Jesus came to save the sinners. He didn't came to save the righteous. Of course, no one was righteous, but your testimony was good, and I appreciate that we're on, and you got the wake-up call now where someone shared with you, now that you're going to be a father and you're married, things will just blossom out to the point that you will find out it's a complete 180-degree turn, and you'll be welcome to the Christian world. The Lord be magnified.